Hello everybody, here comes a review of global trade and trade restrictions, in particular import tariffs and quotas. And we're going to start with exports, then we'll talk about imports, and then we'll talk about import tariffs and import quotas. We talked about benefits from specialization and trade earlier, so today we're going to look at this situation from a different angle, using a different model. And the starting point is supply and demand curve. So what we're doing here, we're looking at domestic supply and domestic demand. So that's the case of closed market. So there is no trade, and whatever is produced in this market is being consumed here by local consumers. And that's pretty much the story here. But what if this market could be open to world trade, international trade? In other words, this small market is going to join large world market. There are two possibilities for this. One possibility, if you're joining a large market, is that that large market's price is higher than the local market price. So in this case, of course, the large market dominates the small one. So domestic local price, P asterisk, is going to go up to match the world price. So PW is the world price. And as this price goes up, of course, we have an adjustment at quantity demanded in this local market and quantity supplied in this local market. So this is QD, this is QS. So quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded. So consumers consume less than local producers produce, and the difference is being exported. So this difference between these two quantities represent export of this good. So that's the first thing we can notice here. The second step we're going to make is to figure out how this opening of the market is going to affect consumers and producers. And we're going to see that consumers are going to lose because price goes up, right? Stuff's getting more expensive. Producers gain because higher price means more money for them and larger surplus. But overall, we're also going to see that total surplus is going to increase because those who gain from opening this market are going to benefit more than those who lose. And to figure out why it's the case, we just need to compare consumer and producer surpluses before and after the market opens to international trade. So before market opens, producers have that much in surplus. So this is producer surplus 1. And consumers have that much. Remember, consumer surplus is the area above the price and below the demand curve. Producer surplus is the area under the price and above the supply curve. So this is consumer surplus 1. After price goes up and market opens to world trade, international trade, producer surplus increases, right? So price is high now, so producer surplus will be this area, this triangle. So clearly producers gain in terms of producer surplus. So this is PS2. consumers lose. So the surplus shrinks to this area. But the nice thing about this situation, and this is consumer surplus too, the nice thing about the situation is that the overall surplus increases. You can notice that we have this additional area as a triangle that shows an increase in overall surplus. Of course, that's the increase that producers gain. So consumers still lose. But again, the important thing is that overall we have an increase in total surplus. All right, so that's the story with exports. And next possibility is imports. So in this case, world price happens to be lower than domestic price. So as this market opens to international trade, price drops and the market just has to follow it. And well, here the opposite takes place. Quantity supplied now drops, quantity demanded increases. And yeah, this is QS, this is QD. Basically the reverse of what we saw here. So we have actually a shortage at this domestic market, but this shortage is covered by import. So stuff is being brought from outside to satisfy consumers who want to buy more of the stuff than local producers are willing to produce. And again, we can to see how this adjustment benefits the entire society. We just need to see how surpluses change and notice that overall surplus goes up. Only in this case, consumers going to gain and producers going to lose, but still those who gain more than those who lose. So let's see how much surplus producers had. That's what they had in the beginning, right? When price was at P asterisk. Then as price dropped, well, let's do consumers and then drop the price. So this is consumer surplus before price drops. So consumer surplus 1 and it was producer surplus 1. So then price dropped. So of course producers lost then, so they ended up only having that much in surplus. And to be clear, PS1 is this one and PS2 is the green area, green triangle. So producers lose, but consumers gain clearly. So consumers increase their surplus by getting this area for their surplus. So as before, we can see that some surplus is changing hands, in particular this area, as it goes from producers to consumers. So there is no loss, no deadweight loss. And in fact, we have the opposite of deadweight loss. So we have additional surplus, which is represented by this area. So total surplus. Additional total surplus, which we can paint like in this nice blue color. All right, so that's just basically another way to illustrate how trade and clearly specialization benefit societies. All right, so next thing is to look at the trade restrictions. So we're going to look at import tariffs and then we're going to look at quotas. These are different mechanisms, but in fact they end up affecting the markets very similarly, in a very similar way. So for imports, what are tariffs? Tariffs basically are per unit charges. So T per unit charge imposed on imported goods. So it's similar to tax, only here we specifically charge every unit imported, not units produced or sold. Not all units sold in this market. And definitely not those units that are being produced domestically. So how is going to affect this nice equilibrium in this open economy? That was world price, right? And in fact, there are a few things we want to identify here. So the starting situation is the market is open, so that world price dictates this market what price should be, and we have import. So this is QS, this is QD, and the difference is covered by import. So as government imposes charges on imported goods or imported good on every unit of imported good, well, it effectively raises its price at the domestic market because it raises cost, right? So whoever is importing this stuff, they need to charge more because if they don't, they will just go bankrupt, right? They don't want to lose money. I mean, they want to make sure that they can sell this stuff at the price that covers, well, whatever price they pay when buying this stuff abroad, right? Plus the tariff they have to pay when importing this stuff. So you can basically the import, unless import shrinks enough so that price goes up to cover those expenses, we will not have any import. So only when price raises to PW plus T, only then we would have this good imported inside this into this market. So PW plus T, that's the price that's going to be here at the domestic market now because of this tariff. And well, next thing we can notice is that of course import should shrink, something I just mentioned. So import will shrink, and actually that's because of it shrinks, price goes up. Because it's effectively the same as decrease in supply. So import shrinks, and so we have import, let's say this was import 1, this is import 2. So first thing to notice, import gets smaller. Next thing we can notice that given this per unit charge on every unit imported, we would expect the government to collect this, well, the amount of money, revenue, equivalent to equal to this area. Because this is T, right? And this is import, so T times import 2 equals tariff revenue. And then we can figure out how this adjustment affects consumers and producers. And basically what's going to happen here is that well, clearly producers going to gain, right, because their surplus increases. So as before, we're going to see that this initial producer surplus going to increase, so it will go up to this area. That's an increase in producer surplus. Consumers are going to lose. They would have this area before the tariff was imposed, right? But as price goes up, they're going to lose some of their surplus, so they will end up only having then that much in surplus. So basically this area just changing hands, so there is no loss in efficiency. This green area, green rectangle actually takes care of some lost consumer surplus. So again, there is no waste, just surplus changing hands. So instead of consumers enjoying the surplus, government gets its revenue and hopefully uses it to do something nice. But an important thing is that these two triangles don't go anywhere. They just disappear. So this surplus, which used to go to consumers, is gonna get wasted. And this is what we call deadweight loss from this tariff. All right, so similarly to what we saw when we talked about taxes, tariffs do something similar. They also generate, well, revenue, but also deadweight loss. And that's the story of import tariffs. Next thing we're going to look at are import quotas. So again, we start with open economy, PW, open economy price, quantity demanded, quantity supplied, and so initial import 1. And well, what are quotas actually? Quotas restrict the amount of stuff that can be brought into the country. So effectively, they reduce the amount of import. And well, that reduction definitely going to benefit domestic producers, right? Because now they have fewer goods to compete with. And a reduction in imported stuff going to send prices up. And basically that's the main logic of quotas. So let's imagine that government decided to impose a quota which restricts import to 50% of what it used to be. So we'll just cut this thing, right, or this distance in half, and that will give us the amount of quota, or basically the amount of import that is allowed to enter this market. So, well, that will be quota. And well, given that now we have small amount of this good brought into this market, well, if nothing changes, right, we'll have a shortage. So that will be shortage. And well, the usual response to shortages in any market is an increase in price, right? And basically, as price will be going up, well, quantity supplied will be increasing, right? Because basically we'll be moving, like as price goes up, we'll be moving along this supply curve. So quantity supply will be increasing, but because there is also quota, we can show this increase starting from this point. Basically drawing a line that is parallel to supply curve, which is shifted by quota. All right, just look parallel. Let me do it this way. And then I'll just pull it. Okay, so again, as price is going up, quantity supplied increases. And again, if we take into account, so we'll be moving along this supply curve, but because there is also quota, in addition to whatever is being produced domestically, we'll be basically moving along this curve, which is S plus Q. And well, as price is going up, we move along. We move up along this curve and also along this curve, right? So shortage will be shrinking until price gets high enough so that we're back to an equilibrium. It's a different equilibrium, but it's still an equilibrium, and this equilibrium results in a higher price. So that's one important thing here. So that's why in this case, as I said earlier, we end up having something quite similar to the case of tariff. because price still goes up, even though kind of unintentionally, you could say. But still, well, it's not PW, it's PQ, price which we have at this market when there is a quota. So price goes up, and that means that consumers are going to lose, producers going to gain, and well, we can see some exchange of surpluses, and we also can notice some other things. In particular, we're going to see deadweight losses, and also we'll need to figure out the meaning of this area. So it looks very similar to this area, right? But it has a different meaning. So it's not the money collected by the government. This is the revenue that importers now are able to get. So whoever is lucky enough to be included in this list or be part of this business, importing stuff, now they can get really good money, basically buying stuff cheap abroad, right? And selling it high domestically. And it's all thanks to this restriction. So revenue received by importers. Also, we have deadweight loss. Actually, deadweight losses, because we have two areas. And so this is DWL. And well, the rest of it is very similar. So just like on this diagram, producers gain, right? So we go from green to, or from yellow to green. Consumers lose, so we go from purple to, looks like brown. So this part is exactly the same. So of course, consumers lose, producers gain. People who are in this importing stuff business definitely gain, and then we have some deadweight loss. So that's the story of import quotas, and I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your time. I'll talk to you next time.